That's it. Good morning and welcome to another grey but not unpleasant day here in Philadelphia. And today we're asking the question, what's the difference between being a young musician and being an older musician? Well, let's find out, shall we? Tribe of Names, Simon speaking, and welcome back to the channel. I'm a professional musician who has spent the last 30 to 35 years working in and sometimes around the recording music industry, writing and performing. On this channel we provide tips and tricks for the musician, songwriter and music listener in you. So in today's episode, young versus old musicians. What's the difference? Well, first off, let me just say that I'm actually one of the lucky ones. After 35 years, I do have the unique perspective of being able to tell you about what it's like being both a young and an older musician. I started the road with many of my friends who have dropped off along the way, but there are still a few of us here. And it does afford us a unique perspective, having stuck around for as long as we have, into what it means to be a musician, both as a young man and an older man. So here's what I can tell you about the things that don't change. First off, unless you're a musician who has made it really big and is a celebrity and is living on their legacy lifestyle of their fabulous songs which they've written back in the day, the money is pretty much the same. Most of us are gigging musicians. It's a gigging economy. It always has been and probably always will be. So we're living pretty much, I won't say day to day, but we are living on our wits for most of the time. That's the vast majority of us, at least, that are trying to make a living from this. But what I can tell you get when you get a little bit more experience is the ability to sniff out the bad deal that's sitting in front of you. When I first started off, I was pretty much saying yes to absolutely everything that was coming along. And as a result, I was getting some good gigs, but I was also getting myself into a little bit of trouble financially as well. And I think that that's something that comes with experience. You tend to notice the little telltale signs with promoters and record labels and managers and you name it, basically. The people that are there purportedly to help you and sometimes end up stiffing you right royally instead. The second thing that doesn't really change is opportunity. I mean, again, if you've got a little bit more experience, you might have maybe a little bit more tools available in your toolbox to sniff out those kind of opportunities that are available to you. But pretty much, the opportunities are there right from the get-go if you've got talent and a willingness to sort of stick with it, because tenacity nearly always beats out talent as far as I'm concerned. And the number of people that I've seen who are infinitely more talented than I am, who have fallen by the wayside because they just didn't have that tenacious instinct, are legion. I think it was John Lennon that said, life is what happens when you're making other plans. And I think that's the reason why opportunity is timeless, because it always presents itself when you least expect it, and sometimes in incredibly cryptic ways that you only realise presented itself after the fact, and you go, oh yeah, that was it. Happily, if you're tenacious enough, there are nearly always other moments. So now we've spoken a little bit about what remains the same throughout a career, let's talk about some of the differences between what it means to be a young musician compared to what it means to be an older musician like I am today. And the first one, straight out of the gate, is when you're a young musician, you have a blank canvas. And when I say you have a blank canvas, what I'm saying is that at that age, especially when I was young, it felt like anything was possible. It was the bravest I've ever been as a musician, because I hadn't fallen over at that point. I had a lot more bravery. I knew that I could go anywhere in the garden, and that garden was wide open with no fences whatsoever. There was no such thing as genre. There was no such thing as a bad idea back then. It was fantastic. I remember being in a rehearsal studio in Wandsworth in southwest London. It was owned by two incredibly fantastic Rastafarian guys called Jerry and Sippy. Jerry and Sippy, if you're out there, hello. And they were incredibly encouraging. We were awful back then, but they were really, really nice to us, and whenever they'd hear us, they would say, you're doing fantastic, you will get better. Those guys were old heads, and they were incredibly encouraging to us. And when you have people who know what they're talking about encouraging you, when you have no idea where you're going to be going next, it does make you feel as though you can go anywhere. Another thing that separates older musicians from younger musicians, and this is something which I genuinely wish I could engender in myself, but it's my personal conviction that this is gone from me forever. And that is, a younger musician's creativity is more tied into that search for identity than it ever could be for a person at my age. Once you reach my age, you're pretty much who you are, and as a result you can no longer use that as effectively as a tool for your creativity. I remember back in the day, I was genuinely searching for who I was, and I was doing that through my music. It was a valuable tool, making music and writing songs, for identifying the parts of me that I liked and the parts of me which I wasn't so keen on. Another key element and advantage to being younger is that your social circle is much more engaged and proactive in the kind of things that you want to do. Everybody wants to come together and help you and support your band and go out and cheer on. I've seen it many occasions where I've actually been on stage and seen a much younger band turn up with their fans, and they are so enthusiastic. That is incredibly important when you're just starting out on the road as a musician. When you reach my age, you want to stay in and watch Netflix. It's just how it is. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just you want comfort. Who wants to stand in a creaky old sticky floored venue for the umpteenth time to see your friend, which you could easily see at any other time in a decent restaurant? Oh God, I missed restaurants and going to gigs. Maybe there'll be another time for that. Hopefully sometime in the very near future. Fingers crossed. And lastly, one of the biggest advantages to being young is that you have the time and the energy to pursue music. I remember when I was just starting out, it was boundless. I was thinking about music and wanting to play music 24/7. I remember sleeping for only 45 minutes during one day because I just arrived back at about 4 o'clock in the morning because the car we had driven to the show in had broken down and we'd spent the whole night pushing it home. There is no way I would do that now. Ask any musician my age about their experiences growing up and being a musician at a young age, and they'll probably regale you with 100 stories like that. So now we have spoken about some of the advantages of being a younger musician, let's turn instead to focus on some of the advantages you accrue as an older musician. And the first off is you have a wealth of experiences from which to draw creatively upon. And it's interesting when I thought about this before I made this video, because I can't quite tell now, looking back on my life, when my creative enthusiasm to find my identity tailed off and my experiences took over to fuel that creativity that has borne me out through to today. It's an interesting thing, and I think it has changed my music in very subtle ways. One of the things I've often thought about is that when you're a young musician, it's incredibly easy to talk with conviction about your hopes and desires for the future and sticking it to the man. But one of the things I noticed that when you get old, you can talk with a lot more authority about your life and victory and regret and loss with incredible authenticity and ownership. And that's very, very important. You can draw on your life experiences as an older musician and write songs which you just can't do as a younger musician. The second advantage of being an older musician is you know who you are and what you're capable of. And this takes me back to what I was talking about, rehearsing in that very, very dingy but fabulous rehearsal room in Wandsworth in southwest London back in the day when we were all 19 and 20. We had loads and loads of enthusiasm, but absolutely no way to direct it because we hadn't developed the tools as individuals in order to make songs sound great. Today, I know my studio, I know my DAW, I know my guitars, I know my pedals, I know exactly how to attain the kind of sounds which I have in my head, or at least I have a better chance of attaining those sounds now than I used to do back in the day. And that has its own advantages. I mean, back in the day, the happy accidents were more often. I would stumble upon a chord sequence, or I would stumble upon a lyrical theme which I had never thought about before, and that was incredibly exciting. Now in later years, as my inspirational artist diminishes, my craftsman takes over and I'm able to craft songs using the techniques I built through my experiences. While I was speaking earlier on about in your youth you have your social circle that allows you to pull lots of people along to gigs and buoy you through those years where you're learning your craft. When you're older, your social contacts may have diminished somewhat, but they're a lot more mature and established, and you'll find that the people that come out to see you are loyal to a fault. They love what you do and they want to stand by you. And lastly, and this is something again which I think is a lot more personal to me, but I will share it with you nonetheless. When you get older, you realise that you are not going to be a superstar any longer, and that you're doing it for the love of the music alone, and that's incredibly important. I love what I do. I love the music that I make, both by myself and with other musicians. And that's something that the career-hungry younger Simon was never able to put himself in touch with. That's incredibly important, and it's part of the reason why I'm still a musician today. So that's all we have time for on today's Monday Muse. Thank you very much for sticking around, and if you like what you saw, please click subscribe and click the little bell icon so you can be notified whenever we produce new videos. So until the next time I see you, Tribe of Names, this is Simon. I hope you have a good week. Take care. Goodbye.